Gonna go.
This will be sent on YouTube.
I see.
Yeah. So, good afternoon to everyone who's watching. And today we have a 47 debate, Didactic Debate Club, with Mr. Abhinandan Sekhri, 362 OB, who was a house prefect in his time, the captain of Hindi debating, and a member of the English Debate Society. He graduated from Doon School in 1992, after which he did a Bachelor in Arts Honors in Economics from Hansraj, Delhi University. His documentary film Chadar won the Best Travel Documentary Award at the EDO Springfest 2000, and the same film received a special Curie Prize in 2001. His political satire Gustakhi Maaf received the Indian TV Academy Award and the Delhi Award in 2004. His popular food show Highway on My Plate won the Best Travel Show Award and the Indian Teddy Award in 2008. He has founded Small Screen and Newslaundry, and Newslaundry has won the Ramnath Goenka Excellence Award in Journalism in 2015 and the Red Ink Award, among others. Today, we have Shreeansh Bansal, Sahhil Chhabra, and the topic at hand is entrepreneurs and dealing with global price crisis in reference to stock drop times, the COVID pandemic we have at hand, and how to overcome these adversities. So first, sir, I would like you to give your brief views on this.
On repeat this thing on.
Sir, on entrepreneurs and dealing with global crises in reference to pandemic and stock drop and all that, and how can these adversities be overcome?
Well, for someone who has chosen to be an entrepreneur, there will always be a crisis. If not the pandemic, then something else. It could be government policy, because when policies change, there's a lot of restructuring required, as happened with news in India. It could be, running out of cash because your projections were not accurate, and they never are. There'll always be a lot of, factors in the market that you're not aware of. So, a pandemic is a pandemic, and this pandemic is unique in the sense that it is a crisis for, you know entrepreneurs who are just starting up, and for well established companies, like big automakers ran into huge losses, huge problems, as did a lot of other manufacturers who were, legacy big. uh, and it also hit, early startup stage entrepreneurs. But if this hadn't happened, that's not to say that entrepreneurship would not face crises of their own, and those crises can be bigger than the pandemic. uh, and in fact, in a pandemic, one can be a little more resilient, because you see that there's pain all around. But being an entrepreneur is a lonely journey, which is why I always advise people who want to start up, do it with co-founders and partners who you trust and who you like, and who you are friendly and comfortable enough with, that you can fight and carry on without, like my co-founder of News Laundry, he's a DOSCO as well. And before that, we were in Vellum Boys together since '83. So, as you boys know, you are very young, but by the time you're in SC form, you realize you can, fight like, complete, uh, aggressive, wolves, and yet make up, and it's fine. Because otherwise it can be a very lonely and emotionally draining journey, and there will always be crises. But the thing is that if you keep overcoming these, the kind of experience you get, the kind of confidence you get, makes it easier to either, start up something new if you fail, or even get absorbed into workforce, because you have dealt with stuff that many others would not have. So that's what I'd say on the subject. But, in the context of the pandemic, it's one saw a lot of startups drying up, running short of cash because there were crashes all around. But at least the data shows that a lot of money has come in for early stage ventures, even since the pandemic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's on this subject.
Sir, and for example, if we have let's say the medical fraternity or any medical entrepreneurs, what should we deal with when we are having, let's say, because we saw now in colloquial terms, a literal boom of how many customers and how many people to tender for. So how do we manage that front of it? Because let's say they started very early and then they just saw that we have an opportunity. So looking at it as an opportunity, but at the same way, seeing that there are so many hurdles and about the lives that can be lost, unfortunately, also. So how about that? Means what to deal with when you have a lot of customers and you don't expect them to be in that quantity.
Well, the thing about anything to do with medicine and healthcare is that, unlike, let's say a Google or a Facebook or a fintech company or any of these other startups which are dealing with data or tech, the ethical element is a little less. It's there, it exists, but it is not predominant as it is in something like, say, education, in news, and in healthcare. Like in news, it cannot be only about numbers and profit, because news influences societies, it influences democracy itself. It can be used to spread bigotry and hatred, it can be used to inform the public. So news is something that has a large part of the canvas is about ethics. And that's true for education as well. Uh, and that is true more so, I think, more than anything else, for healthcare and medicine. So I think what one sees is, of course, a boom of a lot of these, apps where you can consult virtually. Technology has come to the rescue of a lot of people where there was no access to medicine, and I think that is a good thing. People now are getting access to medicine. I mean, there are still some conditions that one has to physically be present with the doctor to diagnose and to treat. But in a lot of cases, just virtual is fine. Like, my family and I got COVID, and we did not meet a doctor. We just engaged online, and it worked. So I think in this particular case, a lot of new ways of doing, of interacting with people have been experimented with, succeeded, and have become mainstream. Uh, but what we also don't see is that a lot of, and I know this because I have spoken to several people in the healthcare business, because of the kind of responsibility on you, and there's a lot of talk and criticism that they are making money, and tests are, they're charging the earth, they're charging too much for consultations. uh, and this is a lot of healthcare professionals and entrepreneurs can't talk about this, that a lot of them are treating people from the government or as part of government packages or schemes, and governments don't pay on time. And what do you do then? So I know for a fact that a lot of healthcare professionals and uh, companies that are dealing with healthcare have a lot of pending dues from governments, because there's a scheme that government employees, through the insurance packages that they have for various, like the army has a separate one, uh, civil servants have a separate one, but governments don't pay, but yet you are obliged to do that bit. So there is that bit which I think gets a lot less attention than it should. But I would highly recommend. But the thing about healthcare is, when it becomes fashionable, a lot of people get into it. And there's a very interesting podcast I will highly recommend you boys listen to. Although you're also young, I can't imagine at the in D form, the confidence with you talk and the subjects you take up. I couldn't imagine in my D form doing all this. So I'm very impressed. There's a podcast called The Dropout. Have you guys heard of someone called Elizabeth Holmes? She
No,
started. Sorry.
no, sir, I've not. I've heard of Elizabeth and Sherlock Holmes, but not Elizabeth Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes. So, well, yeah, if they came together to be Elizabeth Holmes, she started a company. and it's one of the biggest and very exciting scams that she pulled off. And I'll tell you what her company was called, because I'm terrible with names, but it's a long podcast. It was called Theranos, which was like an amalgamation of the word therapeutics and diagnosis. And she was this super achiever who went to like the Ivy Leagues, and she started this where she had the biggest names associated with her, former, top line politicians in the US, and she had the biggest funds funding her. And her basic, what she was solving for is that when we get tested, they take, you boys are too young, so I hope you don't have to get those kind of blood tests. But when you get to my age, you have to have regular blood tests. So they'll put a syringe, and then they'll take one vial, then they'll take another vial, like they'll take 2 3 vials of blood, because there are a whole range of tests that have to be done. While doing that, uh, her solution was that with just one drop of blood, they can do some like 13 or 23 different kind of tests. uh, but she did not have the technology to do it, and she kind of conned her way through it. And that's an interesting podcast to listen to, not just for, just give me a second please, 1 second, I'm so sorry. um the pressure of having, like, it was a great idea. And I mean, I believe that she actually thought she could pull it off. I mean, I don't think she started off thinking that I'll con everybody. And now there's a huge trial happening even as we speak. uh it's a very high profile trial in the US. But I think when you get funded and then the pressure to succeed makes you, give one lie to cover that another lie, and the lies keep adding up. And eventually you're telling the world that I have a product and I have a technology when you don't. That's an interesting healthcare startup case study that you should check out. Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes. You should check out the podcast around that called The Dropout. But generally, I think healthcare is a very, very tricky business. Uh, like, because of the ethical issue, I believe, just like in news, I think news ventures should be headed and founded by people who are in the news business, who were at some point journalists, whose basic essence is journalism or political commentary, and not businessmen or venture funds trying to say, okay, there's an opportunity, let's do this. Similarly, I think doctors should be the founders of any healthcare startup or practice. They can use technology, but a doctor should be at the center of it, just like this journalist should be at the center of a news venture. And educationists should be at the center of a education venture. Like, a school like Doon, it's called Legacy. It's got Legacy. It's run by a society which is consistent of DOSCOs, etc. But there are a lot of schools that are coming up. Education, virtual education, and apps that educate have become a big thing, which VCs are funding. I believe the center of those should be someone who's in education, should not be someone who's an investor saying, Ki chalo, this is an opportunity. Let's go for this. So yeah, that's what I think. And I think that's the same thing in the Theranos' case. I think the story may have been different if a co-founder or two were doctors. It makes a big difference in how you approach the entire project.
Yes, sir. So I just wanted to tell you that welcome Om first. And Om is only here for 15 minutes, sir, because he's preparing for his board examination. Sir, if you could please allow him to ask a few questions right now, as he'll be leaving by 3:30.
You have to allow him. Yeah, I'm here to answer any question that's asked.
Sure. Yeah, yes, Om, you can ask your question.
I think, Om, your mic is off.
Um, okay, sir. We'll come back to Om a little bit later. Let's move on to Sahil Chhabra because he was raising his
Yeah,
hand for a long time.
I would just like to ask, sir, which field of entrepreneurship do you think is the most risky?
Is the most risk?
Yeah,
Well, it depends on the country you're in. But I'd say any uh, any field that has heavy dependency on government regulation. Uh, I think news has the highest risk, and I say that because there is this conflict. I mean, there's a contradiction within the entire news entrepreneurship model, which is you have to be sustainable, you have to be honest and truthful, you have to hold the government to account because that is the job of news. Yet, your to a great extent, your survival depends on government policy. So, one policy change here and there can completely destroy your model. So, I think news is an extremely risky, one of the highest risk, entrepreneurship journeys you can take, and any which have a high dependency on government policy, because government policy in a country like India is very unpredictable. It changes in very erratic ways. So yeah, that's what I think. Like for example, telecom. There was a huge shake up in the telecom because during the last government they had a retrospective taxation policy which currently stumped people. So people often tend to underestimate what a big impact government policy has on any entrepreneurship environment.
Awesome.
Thank you, Sahil, for your question. And it was a really question which Sir did provide a lot of insight into. Sir, you mentioned super achiever and you are one yourself.
I'm
We
not.
know.
I'm not a super achiever. Far from it. You're being very kind.
Sir, let's move on to Om's question because I know that he has one. Om, please.
Yeah. So,
I
sir, yeah, has I'm home. So, sir, what is required? What tips are required to be the best entrepreneur?
Well, Om, you're an SC firm, right?
Sir, he's in 10th grade, but he's not in Doon school actually.
I see. Okay. Hi, Om. Well, there is no such thing as a best entrepreneur, Om. For example, it really depends on what is your pursuit, what is your aim. I think one mistake that a lot of us make, even as adults, and I have friends, one assumes that everybody has the same goal. Everybody doesn't have the same goal. For some people, the goal is material wealth, which means valuations. Uh, for some people, the goal is individual wealth and not the valuation of the company. I mean, a great example of that was this WeWork. That's another disastrous entrepreneurial journey that you will take. But maybe from his point of view, he's success because he enriched himself to a enormous level, but the valuation of his company crashed. So, do you want to build an organization that outlasts you? For some people, that's the pursuit. That whether I'm here or not, this organization is going to be such an amazing organization that it'll change the way that industry works. Uh, that could be a pursuit. Your pursuit could be, I'll pay myself really well. I may have a very small share in the company. The company may do well or may not do well. I don't care as long as I get a lot of money. And 15 years down the line, I'll quit and I'll lead my life. For some people, success would mean having social impact. What these days you call social entrepreneurship, and I'm not sure what I feel about that term because trying to have a social impact, where is it entrepreneurship, I don't know. But for a lot of people it is all about building systems, organizations, companies, or teams which have tremendous social impact. So while that organization or team remains small, the ripple effect it has is enormous. Like people like, I'd say, Aruna Roy, she runs, in fact, Bunker is a DOSCO as well, her husband. They started this small project in RTI. She is still, I mean, she hasn't become remarkably wealthy, which was never her pursuit. Her organization isn't, hundreds and thousands of people big, but her work has had an impact at a national level, which is RTI, the Right to Information Act. So there is no best entrepreneur. So don't let anyone tell you that this is the pursuit of life. Everybody has their own pursuit of life. Guru Nanak's entrepreneurial journey was about self-realization and divinity. I'd say he was very successful. Uh, so it really depends on what your pursuit is, and you may not know till very late in life what it is. I mean, at an early stage in life, you may think, because everybody around you tells you that, you got to do well, and you got to get into a good college, and you got to get a good job, and you can go into your 30s, even in 40s, thinking that, yeah, this is what I want and this is what I'm working towards. And suddenly when you're 40, you realize, yeah, I'm making good money, but I mean, I don't like fast cars, I don't like gadgets, I don't want big house. Like, why the hell am I doing this? And then many people say, oh, you know what, this is actually what I want to do, this is what makes me happy. So uh, for a lot of people, they want to follow their heart, they don't want to listen to people, and suddenly they get into 30s and 40s, they say, yeah, I actually want a lot of material stuff, but I didn't pursue that. Then they quickly have to start figuring out how to get a job that pays them well. So it may take a while to decide what you want out of life, but it's not the same for everybody. So what is successful entrepreneurship is different for different people. I would say, as long as you can find an equilibrium in your pursuits, your actions, and the environment that you exist in, you're successful.
Thank you for that insight, sir. And I think Om's appetite for the question must have been satisfied. Now he'll have to take a leave for his preparations. Thank
Okay,
you.
Om, study hard, do well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And bye, Shaaktam. Bye, sir.
Bye.
Bye. So one more of my question. As an entrepreneur, what do you think should be a person's everyday daily habits? What should they keep doing, and which can lead them to success? Where are you, and specifically yourself, are you someone who schedule the time to study industry news to keep their expertise current, or something, rise early and go for a run to re-energize the day ahead, or spend sleepless nights and then work? What is your daily practice?
Well, I'd say I'm not like I do rise fairly early. I'm not 5 or 6 a.m. type, but I mean I don't sleep till 9:30, 10. Uh, I wake up early-ish, maybe 7:30, and I do yoga every day. I play football at least once a week, sometimes twice, even at the age of 47. In fact, today was my football day. Um, I I do tell youngsters that the way I used to work in my 20s, me and Prashant started Small Screen in the year 2000, 99 going to 2000. And 99, it was like an informal thing. By 2000, we knew this is what we want to do. I was 24 at the time. Now, the way I could work in my 20s, I can't today. My body can't take it. It will not. And because of the kind of, you know, I'd say, in disciplined life I had, because of the hours you would keep. We were making travel shows, so I would be on the road shooting, and I had this terrible habit that I would not like to eat while I'm shooting. And if you're shooting through the day, I'd have a heavy breakfast, and then at night I'd get to the hotel and just have a lot of sweets. And through the day I'd keep eating, these cakes. So I mean, I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was, I think, in 2012. That's about 10 years ago, when I was 37, which is a young age for diabetes. But it was bad lifestyle. I mean, there would not be enough sleep, there would be bad eating habits, but I could work. I mean, I could work, and I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I could be shooting and working till 2 in the morning and wake up at 4:30 and write scripts for Gustaki Maaf. Just 2.5 hours sleep, and then go out and shoot for the rest of the day, and then get back again late at night, then rise again early the next day. I mean, I could do that 2-3 days, and then third day I try to catch up on my sleep. Today I can't do that. My mind won't work, my body won't work. So I would say that you shouldn't underestimate the resilience, the strength, and the stamina of your youth, because when you're old, you will not be able to work like that. I mean, I could work on full, my mind was there, it was sharp. I could take informed decisions. I could write a good script, even if I hadn't slept. Today, I can't. So the one thing is, your habits will change with age. And because, Small Screen started in 2000, by 2012, we started another startup, which is Newslaundry. So while that had stabilized and that was doing well, I decided to get into something else that was a struggle all over again. So I think there is a attraction I have for always wanting to be at the combat stage of trying to make things work. But being able to work hard is the single most important thing, and which is why it's not for everybody. You see, I'm not married, I don't have kids, so I can give all my life to work even now, and that could be frustrating for some of my colleagues because they have lives, they have wives, they have kids, they have. So I mean, I can come home and I could still continue to work. I can wake up early and go, because there are very few things that demand my time, and that's always an advantage for someone who is an entrepreneur, because when you have a wife, when you have a family, you cannot possibly give that kind of time. So that is an advantage. I'm not saying it's advisable for everybody, because I think there is a huge value in family. Uh, but that is something that I had, that I was always thinking of work 24/7. Even when we started Small Screen, I was always Newslaundry, I was always thinking of, okay, now what can we do to make this better. What should the website look like, what should the kind of story they do, what are the kind of people we want to hire, what is the kind of projection of a brand that we want to do. During Small Screen, we've made, I don't know, 30-40 television shows probably, but we've written about 150-200 proposals. So one is always thinking about, okay, I'm home, okay, now okay, I can write a proposal on this show, that show. I've written 5 scripts which are still lying there, maybe they'll be produced one day. So you're always thinking, and that is an advantage that anyone who wants to get into the entrepreneurial space will have, is the single-mindedness of success. And by success, I don't mean some grand success of your idea actually working. And that single-mindedness is the one thing that I would say you have to have. You cannot be saying that this is my second, third, fourth priority. You won't succeed, because there are many people out there who are really hungry, for whom it is their prime priority. Like my nephew plays football, and he's very good, and he goes to train at a fairly expensive coaching center. But I always tell him, when they enter tournaments, and the teams that come from very humble backgrounds, who have torn shoes, they have they win way more than these guys, from rich families, and who have drivers who take them for training and drivers who bring them back. Because when you're playing against someone who is playing to survive, because the way out of poverty is that they have to make it to one of these Indian teams or a state team or something. You're playing for survival, like Ronaldo. If he didn't succeed at football, he was staring at poverty. So that single-minded drive. So if you come from a fairly privileged background, that is not instinctive in you. Because if you don't, ठीक है बेटा, या तो family business है, या मम्मी पापा know someone, या आप किसी डॉस से बात करके लग जाएगी नौकरी, which at a level takes away the desperation. And to really make it, you have to have the single-minded desperation that if I don't make it, I'm going into poverty. If you're competing with that guy, you cannot be complacent.
Yes, sir. Sir, there are many, we just Google it up. If we want to start an entrepreneurship or something, that there'll be many advices we'll see. And you have a lot of experience. Is there any popular entrepreneurial advice that you disagree with, or disagree with, which is not that useful? And why? Why do you disagree with that, if you do? Because they'll give many kind of advice even when, let's say, they are not entrepreneurs themselves. But since we have you today, we want your insight into anything you think is not required, and it is too hackneyed, yet it is something which is not required.
Well, at the top of my mind, I can't think of any specific entrepreneurial advice that I disagree with, but There are two uh, big fundamental things that I disagree with that I have observed in my journey. One is that people who um, who have, and I'm not saying then they're not smart. I mean, smart is a very wide thing. Is the person intelligent? That's a very wide thing. Like, you can be academically very intelligent, yet your people skills and your emotional quotient can suck. And these are the two things that are more important when it comes to at least a non-tech startup. Um, so the one thing that I saw was like when we started News Laundry, everybody from the industry told me that a subscription based model will not work in India. We were told that at every stage. Switch to an ad funded, switch to ad funded. You have to have clickbaity stuff. You have to have stuff like that. We resisted that throughout. Because the point was, if one was to change the model, one cannot go to conventional ways of thinking. And because the tendency of education, I don't know how it is now, because I hear a lot of podcasts about all kinds of different courses coming up, different kind of subjects being taught in colleges and universities. But back then, what they called the best and the brightest, quote and unquote, uh, were basically guys doing MBAs and going on case studies. That's what they teach you, basically, case studies. And if I wanted to replicate a case, there's a case study there. I don't need anyone's advice. But because the entire education was based on case studies, they found it very hard to think outside the case study. So there was a very traditionalist legacy way of thinking. And that I've disagreed with most of my life. The second thing, I had been invited to, I think, KIT, I think it's Institute of Technology in Karnataka. It's somewhere near Mangalore.
Yeah.
It's considered one of the top ones. And everyone was talking, like, what they had several speakers, and everyone was talking about entrepreneurship and how they want to start up, how they want to do this, they want to start a new company, almost as if it's a virtue. It's not a virtue. It's a choice. Like, I like wearing blue jeans, someone likes wearing black jeans. Entrepreneurship by itself is not a virtue. It is one of the many things you can do with your life. There is as much struggle and success and failure and challenges in joining an existing legacy organization and trying to change it. There is as much achievement, honor, pride in joining someone as a manager and rising to the top. Like, there was this fantastic story that I had read about this guy who was a janitor in these nachos, these chips companies. I forget which one of the biggest ones in America. And he was Hispanic. And he said, your American tastes are not catering to the Hispanic taste of these spicy nachos with salsa. Like, they didn't have that product. So he went to the CEO and said, he said, what do you do? He said, I'm a janitor in your company with thousands of employees. And he rose. And there's a very good interview of his. I forget the name, but if you Google janitor, Hispanic, I don't know which are the prominent. I think it was a PepsiCo company which made these chips. So I found his journey incredibly inspiring. Sorry, Cheetos, probably Cheetos, correct.
Richard Montaner on his journey from factory floor to PepsiCo.
You guys are just too smart. Yeah, you see, my old brain can't recollect. So you must read his story. You must read his journey.
So Cheetos was the company you were referring
to. So you must read. His journey to me is more or as inspiring as any startup founder, because he worked in a legacy organization. He didn't let the fact that he was a janitor stop him. He said, "ठीक है, I clean floors, but I have an idea which these, Yale, Harvard educated guys don't." And he executed it, and he, rose to the top. And in his interview, he does feel that the company was a little unfair to him, and probably was. But yet, that was as inspiring a journey. So one fundamental axiom of the Gen Z and millennials that I disagree with is that entrepreneurship is a virtue by itself. It's not. Entrepreneurship is also as good or bad, as intelligent and stupid as taking up a job somewhere, but doing it well. If you were to ask me if I were to live my life all over again, what would I like to do? I'd like to play football and dance. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to excel in both. I used to love dancing when I was young. I used to love playing football. I still play. But now I'm too darn old. But if I had to go back and do it again, would I spend, 16, 18 hours writing and directing and looking at documents? And no, I'd spend, 10 hours playing football and 6 hours dancing. That's what I'd like to do. And, be really good at it. Maybe, dance as a background dancer for a Michael Jackson concert. I mean, that was the ultimate dream of every dancer. So, and if I could achieve that, I'd be happier than I am today. But ठीक है, मतलब at that time dancing wasn't a profession. If you went to your what you want to be dancer, they say बेटा बाहर जाओ, dancer का scene नहीं है. So I mean, I just think that the virtue or the some thing associated with being an entrepreneur is something that is more marvelous than other things is something I disagree with.
Sir, final question. After that, I'll move to Shreeansh and Sahil's questions. If you were to write a book about yourself, an autobiography, how would you name it?
Son, I'm not planning to write any autobiography as of now. I don't know, man. I can't answer that question. I haven't
No,
thought
but
of that.
if you would, what would you name it? Or if you were to, let's say, it's another way of asking, what phrase or what sentence would you wrap your amazing experience with in?
Well, I'd probably title it "A Life Full of Regrets." And why I title it, even though it sounds very dismal and a depressing title, even though I'm very happy where I am, I feel very satisfied. I go to sleep satisfied every night. I wake up full of energy, want to work. I think I see a lot of people who are interviewed and who are considered successful saying that I have no regrets in life. It's one of those cliches that I'm tired of hearing. And in my view, it is a very unintelligent thing to say. It reeks of someone who lacks vision, creativity, uh, lacks imagination, because you cannot have a life without regrets. If you have a life without regrets, you haven't lived. And I title it that just to kind of destroy that cliche. uh, Life's full of regrets. It doesn't mean you're not happy. You can be very happy, but you can still have regrets, and it's important to have regrets in life, because it's like saying that I did everything perfectly. I didn't. It can be as small as talking to someone rudely. I shouldn't have done that. It could be a big decision, which just give me a second, sorry. Or it could be something big as a life decision that you took. That doesn't mean that the life decision that you took is not has not got you to a good place, but it wasn't what you would have liked to do. Or you know I wish I'd spent more time playing a sport when I was young. you know so I think I would title it a life full of regrets, only to show that you can have a life full of regrets and still have a very happy life.
Yes, sir. Thank you for all that amazing insight. And I'd like Shreeansh to ask his question first.
Yes, sir. So the first question I would like to ask is that what are some key terms and concepts that we should always keep in our mind while doing entrepreneurship?
I keep coming back to government policy. Before you start on any entrepreneurship, first of all, you guys are very young. You're 12 or something.
Yes.
So these are very heavy things. So first thing, enjoy life, enjoy your youth, enjoy your childhood. Run behind butterflies, catch caterpillars, watch them turn into pupas and little Hajmola bottles like we used to. Because these are things you can't do when you're an adult. So make sure you do a lot of that. But definitely examine the policy around your industry very closely, because in my view, a lot of entrepreneurial journeys are cut short because they have examined the product, they have examined the market, they have examined a lot of other things, but they haven't very closely examined the policy framework that you're operating in. And the policy framework in some industries is key. So examine policy framework, speak to policy wonks, speak to, writers at think tanks who write policy papers to understand the lay of the land and how the policy works in different parts of the world, in different countries, and different administrations. The second thing, term, well, not a term, but I think it's more useful to familiarize yourself with concepts rather than terms. By the way, I'm a, no jargon kind of guy. So I I believe that uh, if you can't explain something without jargon, you don't understand it well enough. So the second thing I would highly advise is speak to other people who have both succeeded and failed at whatever journey or entrepreneurship, space you want to get into. But talk to them purely like a sponge absorbing stuff without any value judgments on it. Because just because a successful person told you that this is how it works doesn't mean that's how it works. It worked for him or her, it may not for you. It's like knowing how a forest or how a racetrack works. You may take this route or you may take that route, but if you know the lay of the land, you will know what to expect where. So I did not do this because actually when we started News Laundry, there were very few digital news portals out there. And when we started Small Screen, there were very few small production house startups. But as I met more and more people, I spoke to more and more people, the value of experience is priceless. Again, I repeat, that doesn't mean that person is right. So you have to look upon those conversations, you have to look upon those interactions as stuff to investigate, scrutinize, just to know, not to agree or disagree with. You know, and like I know this bottle is green. Okay, good, I know it. It's of no value to me right now. But tomorrow, if there is a technology where if I put a green bottle out in the sun, the rays that come through it will turn, I don't know, lead into, gold or some shit like that. I know there's a green bottle lying there. I know it. It's not a good or bad thing right now. So similarly, you must speak to people who have been on that journey without taking their word for the gospel truth. They may be right, they may be wrong, it may have worked for them, it may not. But to know as much about the journey is something that can really help you. It's like when you train for football, you train all sorts of skills. You may do a step over, you may not. You may volley, you may take a half volley, you may, take a little dink, but you should know all three. So you know when to use it.
Thank you,
Now,
sir, for my first question. I have one more question. My question being, today you are a successful entrepreneur. So, what do you think were some, like, how did you push yourself from the adversities you faced during the your process you are today?
I'd say luck has a lot to do with it, Shreeansh. I have very, very good co-founders and friends. They are not just co-founders, they're friends, which is why I said, if you're going to take up an entrepreneurial journey, it's best to do it with co-founders who you trust, who you love, who are like brothers or sisters or whatever relationship you have with them. Because there will be lots of disagreements, there'll be lots of fights, but you have to be so solid that you can recover from them, like you fight with a sibling and you're still siblings the next day.
Yes, sir.
Because an entrepreneurial journey is emotionally very taxing. There'll be suddenly no money in the bank, and it's not working, the idea is not working, the tech is not ready, the payment gateway is not ready.
Mhm.
The RBI has changed the rule of those recurring transactions like the RBI has right now. All sorts of things may happen. So that is one thing that is very important. You have to be emotionally resilient. If you're not emotionally resilient, you should reconsider an entrepreneurial journey, because if you can't recover from a disappointment, a dumping, uh, a double cross, uh, someone screwing you over, it's going to be hard to deal with that. So you should be able to say, take it. But for me personally, the most important thing was the people around me. I was very lucky, and I can't advise on how you get that. I think I just have to thank God. I have had very supportive friends, very supportive family. I had an amazing co-founder like Madhu Trehan on Newslaundry's journey. I had an amazing co-founder like Prashant on Small Screen journey, who really knew his stuff. And people have been very good to me. I'll say that. I mean, I've just been very, very fortunate and blessed. So I think it would be my hard work and pursuit, maybe 25-30%, but 70-75%, I'd say I've had amazing colleagues, amazing teams join me and work, and amazing people watching out for me, that each time there was a mess up and it seemed like it's falling apart, someone came and said, I'm there. Whether it was by extending funds, whether it was by extending services and other things that I needed, whether it was just saying, you'll get over it, I'm here, just to tell you that you have a friend. So I just think that people who are fortunate enough to have that have a huge advantage, because you can bounce back from big disappointments.
Thank you, sir.
And that's one thing Doon gives you, boys. I have I mean, I think my biggest success in life is my friends and my family. My family, I didn't have a choice. I was born into it, so I'm fortunate to have them. But my friends from school, we are still, thick as thieves. We still jam each other the way we used to in our dorms. And each time there was a failure, there was any problem, there was a legal issue. My legal advisors are my friends from Doon here. They are phenomenally successful lawyers. I don't have to worry about being screwed over by a lawyer. I can trust them like I trust myself. They're watching out for me. So make sure you pick your friends well, because good friends will be your biggest source of success and confidence and strength.
Thank you, sir, for all my answers, sir.
Thank you, Shreeansh, for the questions. And now to Sahil's question.
So I just have one question. So which is the best place to start a like a brand new company?
Best place as in geographically?
Yes, it's like country.
Well, I mean, my answer is, I mean, it's a very broad question, because it's very context specific, depending on, what's the industry you want to get into.
In like a medical perspective.
I think medical perspective. See, the thing is, in medicine, if there's no major regulation around it, generally from a legal point of view, starting a company in Singapore and the US is better, because purely there is less hassle in paperwork, in filings. It's more expensive to file over there, your annual filings that you'll have to do. But these places are hubs for entrepreneurship. Berlin is a very good place. If you have a German partner and you start in Berlin, because Berlin is really incentivizing entrepreneurs, especially in the tech space. But generally, US and Singapore are great places, because there is relatively less interference from the policy level. There is greater access to funds and VCs, etc. And if policy allows, and the industry you're in, you have that flexibility, you can register anywhere and work out of whichever country you want. So from that point of view, just like what that cliche of ease of doing business in countries like that is easier. So just setting up is easier in those countries. But in news, it's the policy is a little more complicated, so it's not that easy, because you're considered an Indian company as long as you reporting Indian news. So it may not work in every industry.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, two questions of mine as well. My first question is coming back to the topic we had in discussion today about adversities. You mentioned Singapore and USA, but in terms of adversities, how is India and dealing with adversities, and what can it improve? What is India's rank in that earth? How can it improve if it's not that good?
No, I just think, my answer was purely from the point of view of where you should register your company. You can work anywhere. I mean, you can be registered, like I think, some of these, like Paytm is not registered here. Uh, it is registered here, but the dominant shareholding is not Indian. So, I mean, it could be a, no, sorry, it's registered here, but it's uh, majority shareholding. It's significant amount of its funds are not Indian funds. So, but because it's in the payment business, there's a lot of policy, regulatory framework around that. But see, I mean, it really, again, there's no one answer for that. Yeah, it really depends on what you want to do with yourself, and like I can't imagine living anywhere except India. I I just there's a familiarity to India that I love. I have a routine and a life here that I cannot replicate anywhere. So, Delhi, I'm breathing foul air. I'm dealing with traffic, but I love it. I love the city. I can't imagine living anywhere else. And also because the business I'm in, news, what am I going to do anywhere else? I understand news. I have, read Guha, most of my political reference points, my historical political history, because I've been, fond of reading from a very young age, are India. And that's what I want to report on. So for me, it's not a question of what is good, what is bad, what is better. India is where my work lies. I know this space. I can do a travel show in India because I know India. And that's what I want to do. But if I were to just say very generally, I think India can make it easier for entrepreneurs to prosper. Yeah. I think that is something that no government in India has really kept as an important enough issue. There's too much of focus on legacy and big industrialists. I mean, everything is done to make life easier for them. And the fact is, why America continues to be as successful as it is because the small and medium size and small and medium are still in the billions of valuations. I mean, you don't have to be an Apple or a Facebook. Even the ones who are like number 10,000, but the amount of economic opportunity, the commerce that is created, like between Small Screen and Newslaundry and our production company, our news company, our events company, we have three companies. We probably employ about 100 people. Hopefully that'll become 200. Imagine 10,000 companies like ours. you know you're talking hundreds of thousands of people. But no, but it's so hard, it's so damn hard that a lot of people just give up because the policies are not optimized for small entrepreneurs. Policies are optimized for the biggest of bigs, and that is a huge failing, I think, of India.
Thank you, sir. And my last question, the Doon school has told us as an assignment to read some books in these winter vacations. So, which book would you recommend for us?
Okay, I'm looking at my bookshelf here in D form, so I have to suggest something that is appropriate for D form. Definitely read David Copperfield. Yeah, I read it in D form and I loved it. I found it extremely sad, but it's a book I kept going back to. So definitely read David Copperfield. It is a marvelous book at any age. And if the first reading you do is of the abridged version, I read the abridged version. I read the unabridged version much later in life. But you should read David Copperfield. If you don't find it too heavy, and if you do put it aside, you shouldn't try to read a book that is not for your age group. I mean, Ram Guha's India After Gandhi is a very good book. But I'm not sure a D farmer would find that interesting because, that's an age where you should be reading about other stuff. Um, what's the stuff that I read in D form? In D form, I had read. Let me think. What was? I mean, I had tried PG Woodhouse at D form. I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it either. It just taught me, to play with language a little better. Um, I can't think of. I'm so sorry, but my mind is just full of books that are more appropriate for adults. So I can't recommend those. I mean, I like reading biographies a lot, but I mean, Makers of Modern India by Guha is a fantastic book to read. But again, I don't know if it'll be too heavy for your age. Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs is a fantastic book. It's very well written. He hasn't airbrushed Steve Jobs' ugly side. I think that's a fantastic book to read. I really enjoyed reading Che Guevara's biography, A Revolutionary Life. Again, it's not airbrushed. It shows his ugly side, his cruelty, his homophobia, and his other abhorrent, uh, traits. But it gives you an idea of what are the kind of life choices a lot of people made. Alex Ferguson's okay. Here's one. You must read Alex Ferguson's biography. He was the most successful manager of Manchester United. I don't know whether you know of him. Have you heard of Alex Ferguson? Sir Alex Ferguson?
Yes, but I thought that he was the Arsenal coach.
No. Sir Alex Ferguson was the manager of Manchester United during the David Beckham, Van Nistelrooy, Rooney, Ronaldo
Yes,
also.
he
Ronaldo
was
was
very famous, sir.
So that's a fantastic book to read. It shows you, managing people, how it's hard, and it's about sport, and I love sport. And as soon as you're old enough to appreciate them, I would highly recommend read all Salman Rushdie books. You can start off by one of the easier reads, which is The Ground Beneath Her Feet, or Shalimar the Clown. Shalimar the Clown, it's one of the characters is a metaphor for Kashmir. So it's political, the thing. Oh, and Haroon and the Sea of Stories by Rushdie. It's a marvelous book because when you read it as a child, you're just, it keeps you hooked because of the colorful, tapestry of characters of his surreal world. And as you grow older, you realize that all these are metaphors and symbolisms for political commentary at a higher level. It works at many levels. So Rushdie and Dickens is what I'd say.
Thank you so much, sir, for this amazing session we had today. And I, I know that we got a lot of insight into entrepreneurship, and with a super achiever like yourself, I'll repeat. Uh, Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining, everyone. And thank you for gracing this occasion.
Thank you, boys. Good luck. I hope you get back to school soon and enjoy the wonder that is Doon. I spent some of the happiest years of my life there, and cherish every moment that you have there because there are very few experiences that the world has to offer like that of boarding school, which is a magic of its own. So good luck, have fun, work hard, study hard.
Sir,
Thank you
I
so
would just like to ask, sir, as a person who plays a lot of football, sir, is Doon good for football?
I don't know if it is now, but no, I don't think so. Yeah. If you want to play at a serious level, you can't be in a boarding school.
Yes.
You got to be training 4 5 hours a day, 3 4 times a week, and a boarding school can't allow that. It's not viable. Doon, you go to become an all round personality. It's called the crucible for character. Mr. Foot's plaque is there in the main building. You'll read it when you go there. Uh, they the what they're trying to achieve with Doon is not people excelling in a sport or in a field. The idea of Doon was to make uh, a group of people who are educated, well-read, disciplined, and have a very high level of ethics and morality because they wanted to this to be the place where leaders of India come out of. And for that, you can't be focusing on a sport. So if that is your pursuit, then you may want to reconsider. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, boys. Good luck.
So I really enjoyed the session with you.
Thank you.
Yes, I enjoyed interacting with you boys. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed this. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you
the
so
pleasure
much.
is all ours. Thank you.